3, 2, and just kidding, we already started. Evolution series number 5. I did that one time on the other. It's the best way to start. Okay, evolution series number 5. We have Kandace Lytle, yoga extraordinaire, guidance counselor extraordinaire. What else is in the mix? Can you please just fill in any of the gaps in your job title, and then also how you got into it and how you got into yoga?
So I guess I'm sort of a mix of those two roles, and then I'm also a writer. That's a big part of my life as well, and a very avid reader. So as far as getting into yoga, I went to Southwestern University in Georgetown, Texas. And while I was there, I was studying philosophy, literature, and dance. And those were my 3 majors. That was what I was really passionate about. And my senior year of college, I was told, hey, you need to take a physical fitness class because dance counts as fine arts, but not as physical fitness. Don't even get me started. And my philosophy professor said, you're really into Eastern philosophy. Maybe you should take yoga. And I knew what yoga was. I knew that there were, a lot of benefits to yoga. And as a dancer, I thought, oh, great, like it will help my flexibility. It will help me grow as a dancer. And it turned out to be just so much more than that, so much more than something that just improved my flexibility and my leaps and my turns. I found myself for the first time in college making straight A's, feeling sort of that mental exhaustion and released through those practices. And I was hooked after that. And I haven't stopped. So 18 to 35, I've kept up with my practice. Is it every day? No, but it's always on my mind and my heart as well.
And the reason, so the core reason that person suggested it was purely from your philosophical perspective?
Yes, so I had a professor that I was really close with. One of the benefits of going to a liberal arts college is I had classes of like 5 students because I was at a really small school. So I had a professor named Alejandro de Acosta, and I took 3 or 4 courses with him, so he knew me really well. And he was actually somebody that practiced yoga and really had benefited from it as well. And so one day I was just in his office for his office hours, and I was requesting to take a course with him. And he was like, what else are you taking next semester? And so we just basically had a conversation of, oh, these are the other classes I'm taking. And then I said, oh, I have to take a physical fitness class. I'm not really sure what to take. I've taken kickboxing. That was okay. And then he told me all about yoga and his experiences. And just really kind of shared his excitement and his passion with me. And a few other students from Southwestern had taken, Linda Sevica was our instructor. They'd taken her courses. So I asked around, and everybody, everyone had such good things to say, and there was so much positive energy around it. Sometimes those required classes we don't get super excited about. And again, I was already dancing every morning from 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. So I really didn't want to go take, golf or bowling. Like I wanted to take something that
was enjoyable.
Yeah. And
So
it worked so well.
It makes me think because, okay, like meditation started becoming mainstream. How long ago do you think?
Well, and I'm from Texas, which so mainstream in Texas is a little different from like California or New York.
Or Colorado for sure.
Or Colorado. I would say really those words of meditation and mindfulness, especially like as somebody in the field of education, because I taught high school and now I'm a counselor, really like the last 10 years or so. Yeah. And when I took that yoga class, the year was 2006. So, a while back.
Okay, so I start to wonder, because, okay, meditation, the pushback you get is people saying, like, well, I can't sit and all this stuff. They're all pushbacks that I understand it all. But what I start to think of is I wonder if, like, yoga may ever come in and kind of hijack the meditation movement. Because yoga is, so, okay, honestly, in the stats, I use them in our sales presentations. From 2019 to 2020, it went from 36 million to 50 or 55 million people that said that they've actually done a yoga class. Mm-hmm. And so I actually start to wonder, like, yes, yoga is more of a commitment than meditation, But I wonder if people will actually start getting the meditation benefit from yoga, but feeling like they're hitting two birds, one stone and crossing off the mindfulness and the exercise.
Yes. So I think you and I have talked about this at some point, but for me, like yoga is mind, body, and spirit, right? So you're getting all three of those, and meditation can accompany that, whether you do it at the beginning or end of class, or whether you just sort of go into that trance while you're practicing your asana, your physical practice of yoga. I think one of the reasons why maybe the last 10 years or so, we are hearing those buzzwords like mindfulness and meditation, and they're sort of being separated from yoga. And now yoga has become this physical asana practice. People think that's what yoga is. They sort of leave out the mind and the spirit. When you look at, when you look at Instagram, you see the physical practice, right? That's what most people see. So when they hear yoga, they think fitness. I'm curious. I think it's curious that there is a differentiation between the two now. And I'm curious what we, like as fitness professionals, as yoga instructors, can do to pull in some of those people who maybe they're scared of, looking funny, or they say, I'm not flexible, I can't touch my toes, and help them understand, like, you can go to a yoga class, a yin class, a restorative class, a gentle class, and get those same meditative benefits while you're moving. You don't have to go to this power flow class, right? And overexert yourself or feel that physical exhaustion. I feel like the movement is starting to, I hope. I'm thinking about people like Adrian Mishler and Sahara Rose and some of these yogis who started out with that physical practice that are now doing all of these supplementary things in their blogs and their social media to show, like, yoga is Ayurveda, like it's eating healthy, it's eating clean. Yoga is mindfulness, to kind of bring that conversation back that, hey, yoga is so many things. There are so many facets to this practice, and mindfulness doesn't necessarily have to be this separate thing.
Yes. Actually, as you say that, it makes me think yoga is not religion, but it is like religion. And what I mean by that is, when you think of religion, just very simplified terms, you have your buckets. You have the Christian bucket, you have the Islam bucket, the Hindu bucket. I'll speak to the Christianity, since we live in the United States. Predominant religion is Christianity, and of that, you have Presbyterian, you have Methodist, you have Wesleyan. And as you continue to subdivide it, it gets even more niche and nuanced. And yoga is really that, because yoga, like when you think of it like a family tree, yoga can be the top of the family tree, but as it trickles down, just like religion, everybody has their own version of it. And one of the things I love about yoga is you can't fail it.
100%.
Like,
yeah.
Legitimately, I actually want to make that a point. Okay, extreme example. You're in a class. Let's say this is not COVID. You're in a class. There's 10 people in class. And for the final 15 minutes of class, someone has pulled their mat to the back of class and is just laying down like a dead person. If you know that they are alive and they are not interrupting the rest of your class, would you say anything to that person at all?
Absolutely not. They are in Shavasana. That's where they need to be. Something that I really love about one of the studios that I teach at, Honor Yoga in Highlands Ranch, is we do not have mirrors at all in the classrooms. Because when you go in to practice, even if you're practicing with a group of people, you don't need to worry about what that person over there is doing. Like, the practice of yoga is going inward, and of course you have an instructor there to assist you and to direct you. But I think in our culture, specifically American culture, we have this sort of insecurity and this need to compare. And so the mirror sort of facilitates that. And this is coming from a dancer who, my whole life, it's like, look at your lines. Oh, look at her toe. Her toe's pointed better than yours. Hey, look at Stacy. Stacy's foot is 10 inches higher than yours. How are you going to get your foot there? Because that was the culture of dance that I grew up in. Whereas yoga, all of that should be removed. We shouldn't be saying, oh, look at this person's warrior two and that person's warrior two. Everybody's warrior two is going to look different. It's a personal practice. And my Warrior 2 looks different at 7 a.m. from 7 p.m. or from Monday to Friday. And that's okay. And if I need to go lay down in the back of a room, or one of my students does, that's yoga. They're getting what they need to fill their spirit, their mind, and their body.
Yes, yes. I was actually very curious. I didn't know that you would say that you would respond to that the way you did, but I feel like a random person who has no idea what yoga is, for you to use that extreme example kind of just cements it, that there's no binary way. And that's what I love about it, is when you hear it, people think of like the Om, Namaste, all of that. It sounds hippie and everything. And yes, maybe it is. Who knows? But there's something. tell me a person you ever heard talk about yoga that just completely shunned it, that wasn't already like a rude person to begin with.
Yeah, I think
It's not everybody's cup of tea. It's not. But if it's not a cup of tea, you know it's you set the teacup down. You don't throw the teacup against the wall. You just simply set it down and let someone else do it.
Yeah, I think that as a writer, so I've combined my passion of yoga and writing. I am very, I guess maybe I'm a little organic and hands off compared to other people when it comes to writing practices as well. I have taught, high school English, where curriculum wants us to say, okay, teach students to have this in their introduction and this in their paragraph 1 and this in their paragraph 2, and then their conclusion looks like this. To me, that's a framework that might help somebody who's just beginning to learn to write, sure. But just like yoga, like that practice of going inward, of releasing the thoughts, and then growing over time, being able to look back at yourself, whether you were somewhere mentally or physically in your yoga practice, is sort of the same as the practice of being a writer, going back and looking at a short story or a poem or something that you've written, and seeing that growth and progress reaffirms the mind and the spirit, right?
Yeah.
And I think whenever we try to get too rigid or too prescriptive in practices like writing or yoga, or I'd argue the same for dance, there is a time and a place for it in something like ballet, right? But if you're really just trying to release that spirit and that energy into the world that's positive, that brings you joy,
Yeah.
being prescriptive is not always the best thing. Sure, it can help to have somebody, explain the rules and conventions of writing or how to do Warrior 2 to somebody, right? But the minute that we start to pass judgment or say, that's not the way you write, or that's not the way you do yoga, we've lost that art, that artistic creativity, that authenticity, that organic, piece that's so necessary for the creative process. And to me, yoga is a creative process, just as much of a creative process as something like writing or dancing.
Well, I think it is, because it's no 2 days are the same. Just as no 2 days of writing are the same. You won't. Like as you continue in the process, you just don't have the same creative thing. But that's what the creative process is removing. It's just going through the weeds to be able to get to the good grass. So I guess a good way to put it. It reminds me of, I don't know if I was talking to you when I was reading it, 365 or Daily Rituals is the name of it. Daily Rituals. Have you heard of this?
I have not read that. Sorry, you cut out for a second. I just heard the word rituals.
Yeah, so the book is called Daily Rituals. And so it was this, yeah, so it's this author from UNC Asheville. He went back and just compiled all of the daily rituals of people from like Nikola Tesla to Voltaire
Oh,
to Thomas Edison, Ben Franklin. It's mostly people that were big in like 2005 to like 1700s. I'm spacing, but there's even more of these like big writers from. It's like the old philosophers, composers, writers like Beethoven, Mozart, those types of people. You
yeah.
start to see all of their rituals, and what's so interesting is it even shows Ben Franklin's, and it shows us a picture inserted of how he typed out what would be our modern day like scheduling app. He took a typewriter,
Mhm.
typed out his routine. But it was so good because you got to see within the creative bucket, here are all these different people that have won prizes and awards and these works of art and like just literary work that has lived on for ages. And you saw how every single person's was different, whether they were waking up at 5 a.m. every day just to get to the weeds, but they would only type for 3 hours, all the way to the people who could not produce unless they were on extreme stimulants and such, which that started to be the thing during the 1900s and sometimes into 1800s. And
Yep.
you get to see how every creative person, the metric of great work was the same, but the process to get there was so different, which is so cool. And I wish people could understand that point of just don't judge yourself. Like, even if you're not doing a right brain piece of like job, it's okay. You're not going to be okay every time. It's always going to be a process and it ebbs and flows.
It's so funny. As a writer, I go to a lot of, or I used to, I guess right now they're all virtual, but I've gone to see a lot of authors that I respect and that I like read. And there's always that question and answer like part at the end. And every time you go see an author read, somebody gets up and gets the mic or raises their hand and says, how do you get an idea for a story? Or what do you do when you sit down to write? Or, you know, they want that like nugget that they think is going to come to them and make them be able to do the same thing, right? We all want this formula, but that's not what being a creative is, right? And so my first year of college, actually, one of my favorite authors, Margaret Atwood, came to my university to read from one of my favorite books, Oryx and Crake. And at the end of her talk, somebody asked her, what if you don't have any ideas? Like, what do you do? And she walked across the stage, she sat down, she took the microphone with her at the table where the panelists were. She put her hands on the table and she closed her eyes. And it was dead silent for like probably a solid minute straight. And then she opened her eyes and she said, I sit like this and ideas will come. And now thinking about that experience, I'm like, that's the most yoga thing ever. Thank you. Right.
Wow.
But just hearing advice like that isn't so, again, prescriptive, like, well, you need to read all the great authors, or you need to study Pantajali's, you know, theory on yoga. Like, we don't have to start there. You can start with the self. And then as you start feeding the self, the things that resonate you are the things that help you grow and help you reflect and help you process, you know, that information. And whether, again, it be the physical, the spiritual, the mental, the creative, all these things that feed us, whether it's conversations with other people and learning from them too, I think become sort of this piece of the spirit, this piece that we can't describe. And if I were to give somebody a syllabus of everything to read to know what yoga is, that's me way less impactful and meaningful than this.
Well, I think for those first steps, the prescription needs, it's useful. If I wanted to learn real estate, I would go to a real estate person and be like, what do you suggest a brand new person to do to start? I would start with whatever that is. But then I believe that the point that you begin questioning the prescription order that you've been given is when you should begin testing your own prescription order. Because the thing for creativity is you can't be afraid to fail, and you have to be willing to trust yourself. And I think that once you've learned enough from others, you begin learning your own style. And every great creative at the top level does it their own way. Kevin Hart, Dave Chappelle, Richard, like all of the comedians, and then all the way even to like the actors and actresses. There's a reason that they're all big, is because they are them. And people can't start becoming them until they begin testing what them really is.
Absolutely. And, you know, you mentioned Dave Chappelle, and last night we watched his conversation with David Letterman.
Wait, really? I watched it yesterday or 2 days ago as well.
So funny. Yeah. And I already knew a lot of it. So if somebody doesn't know anything about Dave Chappelle, I thought, you know, wow, what a great introduction into who he is and his being, and, you know, why he's not a part of Hollywood, and what being a good human and is, and how that relates to being a creative. Yeah. Like I also just adore Dave Chappelle. So I of course was blown away by the conversation,
I
but
think people
I
begin
think,
not to because they attach a joke to his identity. And it partially is because, yes, on his job title is comedian, but his job is literally to invoke a reaction from you.
mhm.
And people I think take that way too far sometimes.
Yeah, and I think that it goes back to exactly what you're saying, like somebody like him, some of these examples that we've given throughout this conversation, they're people who are being authentic to themselves, and they're people who are listening to themselves. Like,
Yeah.
hey, they're going to offer me a ton of money for the Chappelle show, but that's not necessarily what I want. And this isn't the joke that I'm trying to tell. And these aren't the laughs that I'm trying to get.
Yeah.
And this
Can
is
you share
my
that
purpose.
list actually? Because I feel like that, and I think honestly it ties really well into your book too. Do you mind sharing what he said about the laughs?
Yes. So this was actually something I've seen him share a couple different times, but David Letterman he didn't let up. Like he kept digging to try and figure out what the actual joke was, which I thought was interesting. But when Chappelle was filming on the Chappelle show, he wrote a joke that dealt with race, which most of his jokes did,
Yeah.
and a white person on his crew laughed, and he felt like they were laughing for the wrong reasons or the wrong, I guess, purpose or
Yeah.
point. And in that moment, he realized people aren't laughing for the right reason. And that means that I'm not doing justice, or I'm doing maybe even like a disservice in some ways to these racial issues. And that was the moment he decided to walk off set, right?
Clarify just a bit. I believe his exact words were he wasn't sure. It was the way the laugh sounded
Yeah.
made him think, which in my eyes is the fact that he was having to ask
Mm-hmm.
maybe was the red flag.
I think having to ask, and then, I was in college during that time. Chappelle Show was really big.
Yeah.
And everybody had a Chappelle poster. Like, I mean, Chappelle was all over the place, and everybody quoted the same 5 quotes from the show, right? Those same 5 sketches. But even in hearing him say that, I have memories of being in a room with people of all different races and us reacting to things differently, and having conversations about why certain things were funny, or wow, did he push this too far? Or how do you feel as a person of color watching this with me, right?
Yeah.
I'm right. And so I think that, yeah, I just love him. I just think that he is somebody who took a moment, took a breath, practiced that mindfulness, went inside, thought, what am I doing? What am I doing right? What am I doing maybe not wrong, but what am I doing that's causing me this anxiety or causing me to question this laugh?
Yeah.
And reflecting on that piece. And I think that that is also really a part, even any industry where you are teaching others, whether you're teaching them through a joke or teaching, something like a more physical practice in the fitness industry. I feel like anybody that teaches something has probably had a moment where they've gone, did I say that the right way? Did I instruct that the right way? Is this healthy? Is this right? Is this fair?
Because I remember from my group instructing days, I would worry about this. You want to give a level 1 and a level 2. You want the person who's advanced to leave feeling like they had a great workout, and the person who's a novice to feel accepted and part of the group, but like they can have a great workout. And even in giving that, you have to give it carefully, because you can't say, if you can't do this version, do this version. Because now it doesn't come across as well as if you were to say, if you need a second option for any reason, this is it. Because that reason can be an injury history or something of that nature. So now that person doesn't feel belittled. And you have to be really careful, because I remember this happened one time. A lady came in, there were probably about 10 people in a class. She came in, she was overweight, and I gave her all of the modifications and everything, and taught the class, I think, looking back, as well as anyone could have rationally taught it. Take your water breaks as needed, encourage that. Like, you're not going to be literally practicing. You're not going to be working out the entire class. You're going to need to catch your breath. But despite all of that, she walked out of class that day.
Mm,
And I was really, really a young trainer. I was maybe like 19, 20 at the time. I honestly don't
yeah.
actually no. It's probably yeah, something like that. And I thought on it, and then I ended up realizing actually no, there was nothing else that you could do. She left on her own accord. But what you worry about is, well, why does that person have that thought? And you want people, and I say that because I think it's a symbol, it's a parallel to a lot of things in life. You literally just want everyone to feel included because you
Yes.
don't know what internal dialogue they have, but they damn sure don't need external dialogue adding to any negative internal dialogue they have.
Yes, I took over the summer, I did an online training related to race and teaching yoga, just because, everything that's been
Really,
going on, we really need to be conscious and thinking about
yeah.
how different people feel in yoga
Yeah,
studios.
I don't want to say anything about Denver just because I don't know if it would be like conveyed the appropriate way, but I know of what you're referring to, and yeah.
And there were like, I had a moment in that class where the instructor was talking about just the way we say things, right? And to speak to what you were saying earlier, I say things like, if it's in your practice, yogi's choice, things like that to help. But I've also used phrases that I never realized could have made someone uncomfortable. So just to give you an example of something I learned in this training, put your hands up. How many times have we said that to somebody in a practice, in a fitness setting, and not thought about the fact that put your hands up is something that a police officer might have said to
Mm.
someone, right?
Oh, so
Just
are you saying more of that being something that could be like a potential trigger of those
absolutely.
ideas from media? I get what you're saying. Wow.
Absolutely. So, we had a lot of conversations around that, especially like this was in the summer at the height of sort of everything that was going on racially, which obviously is still going on in our society. And it's a huge problem. And we're going to continue to see people protesting. And I'm very proud of the people that are out there, speaking their truth and sharing their stories, because this is an instance where I had a moment like where I was really taken aback and I started thinking, oh my gosh, what do I say in my classroom to all of my students, not just any particular student, that might sound like something that you hear from a police officer, from the military, or that you hear because you're a person of color, because you're a man, because you're a heavier person, because whatever. So I started going through and sort of looking at watching videos that I had of myself. Anytime, I don't really script out what I'm going to say, but sometimes I'll write like little points as I'm thinking of sequencing, and really just diving in and reflecting on who I am, what my background is, and thinking, okay, my background is not the same as every person in my classroom.
Yeah.
So how do I make people feel welcome? And like, to your point, how do I make them feel comfortable throughout this entire workout? And that's why if you're laying in the corner and I know you're okay, I'm going to leave you alone, because this is your space. This is your time to practice the way that you need to practice.
Mhm.
And if you're that person that just needs to take Shavasana for 45 minutes, I'm totally cool with that. Right?
Yeah.
So
Well, like on this whole topic, I had because your book. What are you able to share about this?
So I'm writing a novel, and right now it's being considered for publication. It will. I will be able to share more hopefully next year.
Okay.
What I can say is that it is a novel that deals with the history of a place that has been divided from the late 1800s until the 1950s. Physically, the landscape is divided because there is a river running through it. And due to that river running through that space, there are two halves to the town, a white side and a black side. And so basically what my novel deals with, yes, yeah,
Okay. And it's been like
because of
that
the
for
river that's part of,
and it's been like that for how many years?
I mean, since this
Was
space was
founded.
built.
Okay.
Yeah. So what I will say is this is based on a place that actually exists. However, I have chosen the format of magical realism to write a work of fiction, but I have studied a specific place, and I'm being really careful in what I'm saying here. just because of publication stuff. And what I noticed in looking at sort of historical narratives, looking at the past of that space, and again, spaces all throughout the US, it's just indicative of one space, is there is a history that we have erased or attempted to erase in our museums of small towns, where we want to talk about, oh, we're a factory or we're a refinery town and this is how it all came to be, right? And we completely leave out, you know, the people that helped build those spaces, the slaves. Sometimes they weren't slaves. Sometimes they were actual prisoners that were arrested for crimes that you should never be arrested for, like crossing the street, and then put into fields or put into spaces to work until they died often, that weren't taken care of, that were, you know, Black individuals that should have been free, but we found other ways historically to imprison them, right? So my novel sort of is looking at all of that history, and it's told from this perspective of a young white girl growing up in the 50s, and her name is Sawyer, and she's sort of thinking and reflecting as she comes into contact with people from the other side of the river and starts to understand that her family, who she's always had on a pedestal, historically caused a lot of pain and a lot of suffering in that town. And one of the reasons why I chose magical realism as the format is it enables me to move between different time periods.
And what is magical realism for anyone who's not familiar?
Yeah. So magical realism, just sort of a very basic definition. When we think of fantasy, for instance, we think of, you know, dragons and unicorns and things that don't necessarily exist and aren't necessarily real. Time travel might be in there too. The difference between something like fantasy and magical realism is magical realism blurs the boundary of history, things that actually happened, and you might be introducing elements of magic, not so much maybe things like unicorns and dragons, but things like ghosts or gateways or pathways or time travel, conventions that allow you to explore that historical landscape, to give narrative, to give voice to those in the past. So magical realism was sort of a genre that, not sort of, it is a genre that was developed by the Latin American community, and it's been spreading through, you know, throughout the world. So we look at a lot of Latin American authors that tell stories of multiple generations. 100 Years of Solitude is a great example of a story that weaves 4 or 5 different generations of families together, because, you know, we're able to provoke certain images or certain ideas by incorporating that little bit of magic. And again, when we're thinking about magic, think of it more in terms of spiritual, I guess, type of things occurring. So,
well, the other one that came up in this topic, and I want to get away from the topic of your book just for your what would be the way to put it, like your legal, the stuff that happens in that world. But the one that I remember sparked the conversation for us was Color of Water, because Color of Water is, the starting points are different, yet it's A and B starting points at different timelines, and they move forward. And without disclosing the book, I didn't read in high school. I had to read this one in high school, and I love reading now, love it. But this is one of the first books that ever even grabbed me when I didn't read, and it was a mother and a daughter sharing their stories, yet the story is a biography. It's every other chapter, the mother's biography and the daughter's biography, and you begin to understand the mother more as it progresses, because you understand her foundings as a human and the stuff she had to face, and it was in an era where it was, again, a racial issue. And I want to go ahead and put the nail in the coffin on your book, just so that is off the concern, where you don't worry about like any slip-ups or anything.
Of course.
What I can say is this: I am very proud of living in Denver. I am very proud to be a part of our generation, because I find myself having a high number of conversations. On a scale of 1 to 100, I can confidently say I'm far closer to 100. The amount of people I meet who not only understand that there are issues happening in our world that should not be,
Mhm.
but they are proactive and not adding to the problem, and proactive in trying to figure out how can you help fix and reverse the problem. Because
Yes.
I am proud for this reason. I believe that our generation, 30, 40 years from now, will be the type looking back, and I don't know the timeline for things to be fixed regarding equality and all of that, because on a grander scale of the world, we're still working on world peace and world hunger and all of these things. But what I
Mhm.
can say is I feel like our generation, social media has its negatives, yet you want to be optimistic that our generation is going to be the one that going forward we truly say like, no, this is not doable. It's getting to the point where I'm not surprised if I hear about someone fighting somebody out of defense for another race, because like we're just sick and tired of people acting like they're from a generation 100 years ago. We're not. The world is not. This country was built on people of multiple races. And so for that reason, we should be able to celebrate it equally as people of multiple races. And the whole imbalance of the social contracts and stuff, they will take time to change, but you hope that those changes happen far sooner than later. And I'm grateful to see a large number of at least my friends and people that I call close not only supporting but
Mhm.
like aggressively defending the fact that this is an issue, it needs to change, and like working to figure out just ways to make it change more and more and more month over month, despite COVID and all these other issues we face.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think people of our generation, there's been a few moments like gay marriage or Barack Obama becoming president as having the first, president of color, that really resonate, with me and resonate with, I think, this generation of people.
Mhm.
And we're in this space in this time right now where some of that progress is, I guess, first, sort of being, I don't want to use the word threatened, but um yeah, threatened. I guess that's a fair word.
Yeah.
And
At risk
and
of
that is
being
making people more
slowed down,
vocal.
at least I think could be a safe word, because thread has that negative connotation to it. Where
Yeah,
it's like, yeah, at risk of being slowed down, like we're at a good pace right now
yeah.
of making things move forward.
Yes, and I think I'm new to Denver. I've only been here a little over a year, but I come from Houston and Austin. And Houston in particular is just a melting pot. I lived in the most multiculturally diverse county in the United States. I taught at one of the most multiculturally diverse schools in the United States, and I learned so much from my students, so much from being around people of different backgrounds, of different races, of different religions. And I think that exposure, the more that we are able to interact with people who don't look like us or who don't sound like us or who don't, have those same, backgrounds and experiences as us, the more we are able to, like going back to what we've been talking about, give back as teachers, as leaders, as professionals, as fitness people in the fitness industry. And so finding those opportunities, creating those spaces where people feel safe, like that right now has been my goal. Like, even if I can't make people feel safe in a physical space, let's think about how we do this virtually. Let's think about how I do this on my blog. Let's think about how I do this in anything that I'm putting out into the world.
Shout out to Netflix too, because to bring this full circle, Netflix has done a great job of, at least from what I've seen, helping give more of a voice to this whole thing. And I say it because Dave Letterman show.
Yeah.
What Dave, I'm not, I know the guy's iconic. When people are iconic though, they can be iconic just because of quantity of years and not quality of years. So I'll say that because I'm not educated enough to speak to the man. I know he did something to get removed or asked to be removed, and Obama made the joke to him on one of the first episodes. But when you hear him now on the show, he talks about him having remorse for his mistakes. People make mistakes, they move past them. You just hope what they're saying is in real intention. They're sorry they made a mistake. But this is what I was so happy to see. On the Dave Letterman show, my next guest needs no introduction, actually, not Letterman show. The characters they have: Kanye, Jay-Z, Obama, giving people a platform to speak and spread their knowledge, I love, because those three men, whether you agree or disagree with them, all three of them said something very, very interesting that at least makes you think. And
Mhm.
Jay-Z specifically, Dave Chappelle as well, actually. Jay-Z and Dave Chappelle said a lot about the racial issues and such. But I
Mhm.
love it because you're taking people like, people have to stop judging book by its cover. Jay-Z started as a rapper, but Jay-Z is actually like an advocate because he
Yep.
knows what impact his voice can have and he sees the issues. Listen to some of the stuff about Jay-Z. Did people know that he sponsored a Sundance film related to the racial issue and gives actual examples of how things are happening in the prison system? No. But it's like, for me, that's what my perspective comes from is when you're knowing that these people that have power are using it for ways to give more of a platform to these injustice issues, it at least
Mhm.
promotes the human race.
Have you watched the series Woke yet? It's on
No,
Hulu.
no,
It's very interesting. I think you would really enjoy it, but and I won't say too much about it, but I feel like a lot of people right now that do have this platform that are being advocates are also terrified of cancel culture. You know, what's happening right now to individuals who, yeah, speak their mind or speak up for certain things sometimes. Comedy especially, it's there, and I'm not talking about cancel culture where someone's done something inappropriate to someone else or harmed somebody else. I'm talking about someone, you know, making a statement or making a joke and later maybe apologizing for it or realizing that they misspoke or that they said the wrong thing, or maybe they made that joke in the 70s and now they're, you know, getting in trouble for it. And I think that Woke, this TV show, it's based on a true story. It's about a Black cartoonist who was making a cartoon, and it was very PC, very white people friendly. Let's just put it that way. Okay. And then he had an encounter with police officers, where they mistakenly thought that he was a perpetrator, somebody that had done something wrong. And after that moment in his life, he felt like he could not continue writing that same type of material, that he needed to have a voice for the Black community, that it was sort of his moment that he became woke. And the show is great. It handles it really well. It sort of plays with this idea of cancel culture. It plays with this idea of race relations. You know, how do we look at artists of color? And that's what made me think of this. Somebody like Kanye or Jay-Z, sure, they started as a rapper, as an artist, but now they are very much advocates and proponents of racial change. And that's even seen in their lyrics and their music. But that advancement and that growth and that platform, there's lots of people who want to say like, oh, celebrities need to stay out of politics, or celebrities, you know, they just need to get over themselves, you know, and things like that. And it's like, but these are people who have worked their way up to get to the level so that they can say something meaningful and so that they can use their
like,
platform for
okay, I have to
change.
chime in on that one because to a degree, yes, just because you have 5 million followers on Instagram for doing some unique thing, yet right,
Yeah.
nobody can qualify a like that you are an authority in a certain realm. Okay, like I understand that logic, but now
Yeah,
back to
absolutely.
LeBron. Do you know about the LeBron James I Promise Foundation?
Yes. You and I talked about that recently,
Yeah,
actually.
okay, so you and I talked about that. I actually told a lady that one time. I can't remember if she said the same thing. She was like, athletes and celebrities just need to shut up and like just do their thing. I can't remember if that was her perspective or if it was we were just talking about it, but nonetheless, when she said it, I said, a lot of exactly what I'm saying now. A lot of people, you don't know them and we don't know if they're right or wrong, and maybe they should be quiet and all that, okay? But on the other side, like the LeBron James I Promise Foundation is the epitome of the lady that told him to shut up and dribble being in the wrong. Because does she know, or does the average American know LeBron James is anything more than a person who is an NBA finalist? Like his biggest mistake as an athlete was that he brought too much attention to himself for his announcing his free agency trade from Cleveland to Miami Heat,
Mhm.
which raised like $2 million for charity. The I Promise School, for people who don't know, is where in his hometown of Akron, kids who achieve specific metrics are able to get, there's a lot, but it's like transportation, food. They get free tuition to the University of Akron, which then allows them to like stay in the community, feed the community, and then come back and give back to the community. And it's just creating change from the inside out. It's like you see people like that all the time. People talk about the news being negative and such, and it can be. But okay, go watch my next guest in No Introduction and look at David Letterman interviewing Malala, who got shot in the face with Taliban because they didn't want females going to school. Those problems exist in the world, and we're giving them great platforms right now to really get more attention so that we can begin causing change.
And it's just this really bizarre energy and tension right now. Obviously, like we're in an election year, and that obviously can cause some of that. But going back to this idea of sort of cancel culture, how far can I take something? What can I say? You know, what tier of celebrity do you have to be at to be able to make change or make a certain statement? And then exactly, how do you qualify it? And how do you even sift through all of that information? You know, when we were talking about social media, you know, people think that it's harmful, but there's so much positive stuff that comes from it. And so we just have to, I don't know, I guess continue to go inward, see how we really feel, speak our truths, defend the defenseless or defend the people that need our help, and create. In my mind, you know, that's a big piece of this. Everyone we're talking about, I would say, is a creative. Politicians are creatives too, right? So
people aren't actually right brain or left brain. Your left and right brain are always working together. Your identity is not that you're a creative or not, like you're an artist or an accountant. Everybody has aspects of both.
100%, yes. I mean, we all have an imagination, right? It's just who chooses to tap in and to use it, and then how we use it. Are we using it for the greater good? Are we using it to make money? Are we using it, you know, what's our intention behind those actions? And I think really taking the time and something like yoga or writing or taking a fitness class can give you that time to process, to understand, you know, what it feels like to feel good. I think that's something that fitness really gives us. When you leave a fitness class, even if you're exhausted, even if you're super sore, you still feel good because you did something, right?
Yeah.
It's a very interesting, like, you know, you work out, you feel good. And so as someone who sort of benefits from that, I know my cat she wants to be in the video.
No, get her opinion or his opinion.
Like, hello. As somebody who sort of benefited from just seeing that, like, if I do this every day, I will feel good. The creative process is the same way. If I take 5 minutes in the morning to make a list of everything that's stressing me out and I crumple it up and I throw it in the trash can, I'm going to feel better for the rest of the day if I just take those moments, or I do those routines that you were talking about in the daily rituals book.
Yeah.
There's a reason that they were their daily rituals. They came to know this is what's going to help me create, or this is what's going to help me have voice, right, in the world.
Add to that, life does not go on a 24-hour cycle. Days go on 24-hour cycles. And I struggle with it as well, and I know you're going to agree with what I said. If you have to take a day off from these things, it is not bad. It is a recharge day. There's rest. Stress plus rest equals growth is the formula. Mm-hmm. And so people got it, like, you know when you're being lazy, and you know when you're putting in energy, and you need to recover. As long as you're moving towards your goals, that's all that matters.
Absolutely. And this is why we're here.
Yes.
We're here to help people facilitate that, right? Being a yoga instructor, and again, being a fitness instructor, I don't care what type of fitness courses you're teaching, rest is valued, right? You have to take a rest day. If you have a really hard workout, you have to take Shavasana at the end of a yoga class. Mm-hmm. You don't have to, but ideally you would have Shavasana at the end of a yoga class. You would have that, oh my goodness, that resting period at the end of a yoga class.
Well, hey, because I feel like we've hit a lot of good stuff, so I would love to actually go ahead and ask the final question while we're back on yoga. Uh, Real quick, can you give any social media handles or anything that you want people to follow, especially where they could stay tuned to when this book process happens?
Yes. So as of right now, I do have a website for my yoga and writing combined. It's biblioyoga.com, Biblio, yoga.com. Biblio is, means of or pertaining to books, and then yoga. So I'm marrying my two passions. My Instagram handle is also Biblio Yoga, and I also have a Biblio Yoga page on Facebook. There will be a page for the novel, hopefully coming soon. And maybe if we do another one of these, I can share that website when it happens. Yeah.
Yes.
But for right now, Biblio Yoga is where they can stay tuned. And then as soon as we launch the official book website, that will be shared there as well.
Yeah, I think we covered the topic of the book very, very smoothly and safely. Like,
and I appreciate you giving me this platform. Yeah, I'm not right now we're sort of talking through if we're going to change the title, things like that. So I'm like, I just don't want to share anything other than, my name, it's Kandace Lytle, and my website. So hopefully in the next year or so, I can share better news or more news.
As we begin expanding nationally too, I want to take the things like this and then use our voice to support that voice, because I feel like that is what really starts to create big change in the world that needs to happen. But before we get off on another topic, I'll ask the final question. How do you feel yoga has helped you evolve? And what about that do you wish other people could be able to apply to their own lives?
Oh my goodness. I don't even know what my life would be without this practice. And I've fallen off. Like I've had, months where I haven't done the physical practice of yoga. Like we said, sometimes you just need rest or take a break. I will tell you that those months where I was not practicing or I was not seeking out growth in my practice are usually the months that I'm not productive, that I'm not mentally feeling well, or that I'm overworked or overstimulated by things that often honestly don't really matter, aren't as important as everything that we talked about today. Yeah. So what I would say is, without my yoga practice, and for me, writing is kind of a piece of that practice. So without these two things in my life, I don't know that I would have taken the risks that I've taken. I moved across the country in the last month. And the thing that sparked that for me was going through my yoga teacher training. My first day of our retreat, in the book, she had us write down, what we wanted to accomplish, what our dream life looked like. And the very first sentence was, I will live in Colorado and I will teach yoga. And writing, actually. So I think that just sort of what it's done for me is it's made me live a life of intention. It's made me live a life of always having a vision, always having a goal. But it's also made me live a life where I realize that a goal doesn't necessarily have to be a week goal, a 5-month goal, a 1-year goal. Just having a goal and having a vision for where you want to go will help you set those little checkpoints. And that and that framework, I guess, is sort of comes from my yoga practice, but now it's out everywhere else in my life, whether it be learning a new skill, whether it be managing my workload as a counselor, you know what I mean? Just all of the practices, the commitments, the relationships that I have in my life. I feel now I have much stronger commitments and relationships because I'm living life of intention instead of just living a life where, oh, sure, I'll go do these things and this will make me feel good and I'll go out tonight and not really planning or thinking about the why.
I think
and yoga has made me think about the why.
To put a ribbon on that, there's a reason that you start yoga with an intention, and sometimes that intention can be not to have an intention.
Yep. I like it. Namaste.
Namaste. That is the best spot to end it. Thank you so much for literally all the wisdom and everything. This is the powerhouse of an episode.